Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing well.
Good.
And we have a little bit of good news.
A little bit of good news. We like that.
We will do it cautiously because sometimes our good news flips.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is considered Veterans Week, and we had Veterans Day,
Yeah.
and of course we had our Veterans Day program. But this is something that went on this week. As a matter of fact, yesterday there was a big meeting held by a group I have to admit I didn't know a whole lot about. And I should have, because I liked the name of it, Bring Our Troops Home.
Yeah, good name.
So that's what they were up there, and a lot of former military people who have served in the military. There's a state rep that helped organize this, who was from Wyoming, Tyler Lingholm, and he's very much involved in it. So it's a good group. And I just think they deserve a lot of praise because they walked the halls and talked to people as many as they could. And guess what? They were talking about American first foreign policy. But they were talking about, it sounded like they were talking about our foreign policy.
Yeah.
Bring the troops home. And then they made some points, like we've made for so long. In Afghanistan for 18 years, spent a couple dollars, like $6 trillion or so,
That's all.
It's going on. So this was very encouraging. I hope we can do something to help encourage them and to build their organization, maybe participate in it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's somebody from that organization that might even come on our program
Yeah.
to talk about this some more. But this was, to me, very good news. I'm glad they're there. They may still be in Washington right now, but they had a reception type meeting at the press club yesterday, so they did get some coverage.
Yeah, and we had the Mises event over the weekend, and Scott Horton was there, our friend from Austin. He talked about it a little bit in his speech, and he made the point there are plenty of really good left-oriented veterans groups, Veterans for Peace, and a lot of good ones that are sort of left, liberal-oriented. This one is important because it's primarily a conservative group. These guys are political conservatives, and they're, as you point out, they're coming from the America First perspective. And that's really important because that's going to resonate, I think. And I remember when you were on the Hill, you tried to bring in conservative-oriented speakers to talk to Republican members of Congress to let them know you're not alone out there. There are people, there's a lot of backup from intellectuals. I think this is an important group because of that. And it's headed by retired Army National Guard Sergeant Dan McKnight. And they brought in veterans and representatives from 26 states to come up to Capitol Hill, talk to their representatives, talk to their members of Congress. Hey, I served. I'm a combat veteran. We're not treating people well. We need to bring them home. That is a powerful message. So really, that is a good news piece.
When we finally had a major vote on whether or not the president had the authority to start a war or do whatever he felt like doing, in Iraq, there were 6 Republicans that voted against it. Interestingly enough, there were 3 of us that were libertarian conservatives and 3 moderate liberals.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's exactly what you were talking about. There's 2 groups. But I would say that traditionally the left has had a greater voice in it. But right now they're lost. And
a lot of them,
That's why I think it should be nonpartisan, even non-philosophic. It should just be common sense and constitutional, and promoting it that way, and see how many people we can bring in. So I was really delighted to see this, and I hope they continue their efforts.
Yeah, it's there are plenty of representatives who tout their military credentials. I'm thinking of Tom Cotton, the guy Crenshaw with the eye patch, who just want to send more troops out to die, more troops to get killed. They obviously didn't learn a thing from our foolish war. So it's very refreshing and very important to have these groups, not only lobbying, but also a lot of these guys and gals are getting elected into state legislatures. And that's important too. They've been there, they've done that, they know that this is not helping America. It's not making America first. Here's a good quote from McKnight from a piece we saw on antiwar.com. He said, quote, "We support an America First policy that puts every overseas action to the test of whether or not it's in the vital interests of the United States. Chief among these actions being the deployment of American military forces.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, to me, I sense fatigue and a recognition that it's wasting time, money, and lives, and they're starting to see how many veterans are coming back here that have many problems. It's a lot different than the final conclusion of why the Vietnam War had to stop. Because there was blood in the streets, there were so many things. My Lai had occurred,
Yeah.
and there were demonstrations here and a lot of violence. And finally, you know, the street violence from the far left helped call attention because they had a cause, and that was the foolishness of this war. But right now, it's just sort of fatigue. A lot of people aren't watching it. But the people like this who have been there, that's why this is important. A lot of them have served over there. And this is good. Regardless of how they get there, there's no reason to support these wars. Remember, most of the time when they say this is no problem, it will last a month or two and we'll be out of there.
Yeah.
And sometimes it won't cost much money and we'll get the oil and that kind of silly stuff. So this is interesting that the people will respond just because they're sick and tired of it all. But if they think about it, they ought to be sick and tired of it for the cost of it all. And of course, right now, everybody believes the economy is going to continue to do what it's doing now. But when the economy turns down, and say, where did you waste that money?
Yeah.
Oh, where'd you spend this $23 trillion? Well, you know, maybe 50, 60% overseas activities.
Yeah.
And at negligence here. And my argument has been in the past, you know, to snap your fingers and have a libertarian society and no welfare, no warfare, no wars, that is not going to happen. But I think if we're going to work with common sense, it'll be with this group to back off, bring the troops home. That means you don't have to put on the top of the list, you know, some people that we've taught for 3 or 4 generations, be totally dependent on them. So I would say that that could give us a breather. Unfortunately, I don't believe it's likely, because I think what's going to happen is we're going to continue to do this unless we really get these people active and get people, you know, get at least to remove the burden of the empire. But this is, I think, a significant move, and we have to encourage it. And this to me is going to be necessary because all empires end.
Yeah.
So why do we have to end them in a catastrophe, either a war that is way over our heads, and you know, we've mentioned how our foreign policy is fizzling, you know, and it's not of much value anymore. People are rejecting it as they're rejecting the dollar. So I would say it's time to listen to this group it's time to bring the troops home.
Yeah. And speaking of the antithesis of what they want, which is they think troops should only be deployed to the vital national interest, in the antithesis of that is Trump's boneheaded new idea that he keeps reiterating to the chagrin of everyone around him and every sentient creature. He reiterated it yesterday when Erdogan was in town. He said, quote, "We're keeping the oil. We have the oil. The oil is secure." He is overtly saying we are sending troops to Syria to take their oil. Full stop.
Yes, and this is so foolish, and it doesn't make any sense. The first thing is it doesn't make good political sense, it doesn't make good economic sense, and it also invites more criticism because he has a staff that disagrees with him.
Yeah.
And the staff, you would expect him to disagree with
On
him
this,
because there are so many neocons there. But they're disagreeing, and they're already talking about how they're going to reverse this, and they start talking about, you know, even what he's proposing is illegal. Well, as far as I'm concerned, everything since World War II has been illegal in the sense that it defies our laws, and all these occupations and regime change. That's illegal under international law as well.
Yeah, it is certainly. It's pillage, you know, and it's prohibited by the Geneva Convention. It's an international war crime. But, you know, he said, quote, we kept troops in Syria only for the oil, is what he's saying. And it is very uncomfortable. He's making his experts uncomfortable. But the thing first of all, it's certainly not very respectful to the troops. And he even doubles down. He says, what I intend to do, perhaps, is make a deal with an ExxonMobil or one of our great companies to go in there and do it properly. You know, this oil isn't his. There's no American company on earth who would go in there thinking about the legal ramifications of setting up shop when you're talking about stolen goods. Think about the international courts. Think about how these things would be tied up. No company on earth is going to take that on. It just doesn't seem like he thought it through.
He did get, I guess, a little bit of support from the defense secretary. We shouldn't be surprised. They're supposed to be working together. But Esper said, I want to reassure you, we are going to take the troops out of this disputed land, the border, the safe zone. That's obviously what he was talking about yesterday with Erdogan. But he reiterated that the troops that are going to stay there is to protect the oil. Back to that whole thing again. And all I can think about is when the far left was trying to prevent some of these wars, their chant was, it's all about oil, it's all about oil.
War for oil,
But everybody knew that it was about our patriotism and our Constitution and our liberties.
Our goodness.
And all these other things. But I don't think it's all about oil, but I'll tell you what, sounds like oil is a big deal.
Well, Assad in Syria, who's trying to rebuild his country after we supported a bunch of jihadists trying to overthrow him, he had an interview earlier this month, and here's a good quote from it. He says, "I tell you, Trump's the best American president. Why? Not because his policies are good, but because he's the most transparent president. All American presidents commit crimes and end up taking the Nobel Prize and appear as defenders of human rights and the unique and brilliant American or Western principles. But all they are is a group of criminals who only represent the interests of the American lobbies of large companies in weapons, oil, or others. Trump speaks with transparency. We want the oil." So we say, at least he's telling the truth.
Yeah, that's it. And it's inconsistent if somebody makes the argument we go for humanitarian reasons, to help somebody who's suffering under a dictator and all these other things. So here, the choice seems to have been is to pretend that we're there to save the people and take care of the people and organize a border, which we can't even do here at home, versus oil. So Trump has placed the emphasis on oil, oil, oil. So if you were an interventionist and supposedly a humanitarian, you might say, well, maybe we ought to do something to stop the Kurds from being killed, or something along those lines. But that's not the effort. There's been a decision, and he's in this regard, he tends to be correct because they've been fighting over borders and things like that for years and years.
Yeah.
But I wonder how long they've been fighting over natural resources. Probably a pretty long time too.
And not to put too fine a point on it, but Trump does count on a lot of Christian conservatives for his support. How do these Christians feel about the idea of stealing? I remember a commandment that's thrown in there somewhere about that. But we're not talking about oceans of oil here. That's the weird part. Syria produces about as much oil as Utah. This is not a big oil producing country. I would think that the cost of getting in there, getting the oil out, transporting it through hostile territory, and bringing it to market is going to be so high that it's going to be more than the oil is worth even on an open. So what's the point?
And I think there's one more thing that might even be a greater cost than what you've mentioned, and that is the odds of blowback.
Yeah, our title.
Because the whole thing is, if we're on land, which is considered, I think the Syrian country has been known for a long time, so there will always be people who think it belongs to Syrians.
Yeah.
And therefore, the people who have a homeland don't give up easily. That, of course, is a characteristic of the Afghans because they don't want foreigners, and they don't want Russian foreigners or U.S. foreigners or anybody else. And that's why we're there 18 years, because we should have learned the lesson when we helped get the Soviets out of there, but we didn't. We went in and have done the same thing. We've been in there longer than the Soviets were. So it's a whole mess, but I think that it'll always be a thorn in the side. Let's say that we don't have a financial problem, which obviously I believe we do.
Yeah.
We would still have this concern because it's occupation, and even if it's out of proportion to practicalities, it's like putting a stick in their eye and saying, yeah, but we want your oil.
Yeah.
The little bit of oil you have, it's our oil.
Yeah.
And those terms are so offensive. It isn't like he's going to get the oil and help heat some houses over there or take care of something. No, it's our oil, and it's almost the whole point is we are in charge, and this is part of our empire. We have rules on our empire. We're modifying these rules. We're trying to not have as much bloodshed for American soldiers, but we still have an empire to defend, and therefore, at least symbolically, we're going to have the oil. But then there's the next step is who symbolically will benefit from it? Assad. So therefore, he's supporting, anti-Assad program there, because who knows, Assad might have continued the progress that has been made, maybe recapture the whole country, and this is not what our government, and I know Trump is noisy and gets himself into trouble, but it's really bipartisan. When you think this whole mess started under Hillary and Obama, so it's hardly Trump. Trump just sort of makes it worse for himself, and he provokes a lot of antagonism and opposition.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. I mean, he's doubling down on a stupid Obama policy. This isn't Trump policy. This isn't America first. This is a dumb, failed, I got a good idea. Let's arm a bunch of jihadists and let them take over Syria. That'll be great. Here's the great minds of Hillary and Obama. And Trump comes in and doesn't see. But, the second part of our thing, and you touched on it, of our title, is the idea of blowback. We know Robert Pape talks about occupation being the driving force behind suicide terrorism. Certainly the radicals can say, look, just like we told you, the Crusaders have come in and they've pillaged and they've stolen everything, just like we told you. And people that are suffering, that are in misery, the oil there paid for about 25% of their budget. People are suffering. They're going to say, well, I hate these Americans. They're stealing my livelihood and destroying my livelihood. So it's going to get terrorism. Well, I'm going to close out by giving you some good news and bad news, Dr. Paul. The bad news is you're going to have to do a lot of writing coming up. But the good news is that means that we've gotten a great response from our offering of Dr. Paul's latest monograph, America's Exceptional Bankruptcy, which deals with our moral and educational and societal bankruptcy in addition to our financial bankruptcy. Dr. Paul brings it all together in this tight little package, really fascinating. We're offering this as a gift, as a premium to those who support this program, the Ron Paul Liberty Report, which comes to you daily, 5 days a week, the Ron Paul Institute, which brings conferences and events and publishes books and articles to help us continue to do what we do. With your gift of $50 or more, we'll send you a copy of this. It's the only place you can get it. It's not available in bookstores. And for $100 or more, Dr. Paul is going to sign it, which brings back to the bad news. Dr. Paul is going to have a big stack of books. We've gotten a great response already just in doing this for 24 hours. We're going to do it through the month of November. So get yours now. It's a limited time offer. You're going to enjoy it. Get some for stocking stuffers and all that stuff. And I will have information in the description of this show on where you can make that donation. So thank you very much for supporting what we do for peace and prosperity.
Very good, and thank you. And I do appreciate the support we get for our publications as well as for our program. And today I thought was an interesting program to present because we work real hard to find some good news and bring the troops home by some military and political people, and going to Washington and actually having a presence there during Veterans Week. That's really encouraging. And although we welcome everybody from all facets of life, liberal, libertarians, independents, progressives, actually the group there where we need help, emphasizing that progressives traditionally have supposed to have been anti-war, but the conservatives tend to think that they have to be warmongers, and they have been more aggressive, and they remain still aggressive. But these people are legislators that are interested, as well as the military people. So keep an eye on this group called Bring Our Troops Home. But the other thing is the downside of today's report was the fact that Trump said why we're in Syria is all about oil. It's our oil, and we're going to keep it, and we're going to spend it. And we tried our best to explain why that doesn't make any sense. And the only thing that really will solve this is not tinkering on the edges and say, we'll keep a little bit of oil, but give it oil here, do something here, but not here. No, it has to be precise. It has to be, non-intervention or intervention. If you endorse the principle of intervention, it always grows and always gets worse. That's why Keynesian economics is not a good idea, because they always concede, and liberals and conservatives concede too much government involvement, and it always grows. It morphs into a monster, and that's why economically we have a obtrusive and a very overbearing government, and why we have deficits of $23 trillion, and we have a Federal Reserve totally out of control. But everybody's happy right now. They're on a drunken binge, and this drunken binge is, this is a different system today, and the people over the years have always said new paradigm. So this is a new paradigm. It's true. It is new. It's different. It's more outrageous than ever before, because we have succumbed to the socialist demand, the modern monetary theory. There's no reason to be restrained in printing money, and because the people love it. I had a call yesterday from somebody who wanted me to borrow some money from them. We're going to give you some money, and there's no interest. Boy, there's something wrong with the system. That's not the way the free market works. So we're going to argue the case for free markets and free minds and non-interventionist foreign policy, and do our very best. But thank you once again for tuning in today and viewing our program, and please come back soon.